Hey guys, welcome back, it's Meg. The first week of Mythic Plus is over, and these are some of the hardest encounters currently, so we're going to go over how to handle them. Some of these have been nerfed since the footage was taken, but mechanically, they are similar to how they were, and just as a heads up, I tried to use footage from pugs or groups with no comms, but some of these are from guild runs with comms. First up, we have Kik'atal the Harvester. This is the final boss of Ara-Kara. There's actually not a whole lot of healing required on this fight, but the main pain point for a lot of players that we've been seeing is the lack of melee uptime. And normally this is super detrimental to our playstyle since we're extending our HOTS through Rising Mist and Rising Sun Kick, but the only instances of damage here are the poison debuffs. We're also a melee heavy comp, so I'm standing away quite a bit to allow the DPS to maintain uptime, since my uptime is less important on a boss due to the lack of heal check. You can see I'm not really dispelling the debuff, and this is just because we're not in comms, and the player may not understand that them being pinged means they're about to be dispelled. Letting the debuff expire naturally also just cuts down on some of the danger of the waves so that they can see when it's expiring and they know when their waves are coming out. This is also going to give people a chance to be positioned properly in relation to each other, but if the group's in a good spot then you can revival safely without nuking people with waves. This boss does require a decent amount of personal responsibility from everyone when it comes to positioning for the poisons and not being hit by the waves, as well as avoiding the suck-in and being able to break yourself out of your roots. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. You can focus on your own mechanics, your own damage, your own throughput, but there's very little, if anything, that you can do for other players if they are not taking care of themselves, and I do think that's why a lot of people are having concerns with this fight as well, because you feel kind of useless, and that's just kind of how the fight is designed to an extent, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Another concern on this fight is the pull-in during Chi-Ji and the anti-root properties that Chi-Ji comes with. The super simple solution to this is just making sure that you have more than 12 seconds or so before the pull-in happens to make sure that your Chi-Ji has time to fall off. If you do, for whatever reason, end up unrooted during the pull-in, you can roll out and use lighter than air to cancel the knockback, or you can also use your Transcendence, which I have a short on my channel. It is one of the more recent videos if you want to check that out as well. Overall, this fight is not super demanding, so you can just cycle your cooldowns like normal between the Shaylun's, Chi-Ji, Conduit, and Revival. Just again, make sure that you are not in Chi-Ji during the Cosmic Singularity pull-in, or be prepared with a Transcendence or lighter than air dash if that is a overlap that is happening for you. But you should be able to plan around your cooldowns to not have Chi-Ji out during that. Typically, I'll use Chi-Ji on the first set of poisons and then just cycle from there. Outside of cooldowns, typically the way that I'm healing when I'm not in melee is reapplying my Renewing Mist for the Chi Harmony buff, and then using my Vivifies with the Zen Pulse proc, or using my Enveloping Mist with the Strength of the Black Ox proc. And you'll also see Shaylin used here as well. Next up we have Izo the Grand Splicer, and this is the last boss of City of Threads. This boss has a little bit of a dance to it, so once you get started it is pretty easy to continue. Typically we'll tank this in a circle and then bait the orbs as we move around the room. It's important to move as a group to keep the orbs gathered since the indicators on them aren't super clear, and if they're all coming from the same place and going to the same place, it makes it a lot easier to avoid since these are basically a one-shot. You also want to make sure that you are grouped for the Umbral Weave so you can break all of the group members out pretty easily. The heal check on this fight comes from Splice, which is a dot, into either an Umbral Weave or a Tremor Slam. So a little bit of RNG on which mechanic the boss goes into after the Splice, but you'll be preparing the same way regardless. They are both a large initial hit, and the group needs to be healthy going into either mechanic. If you get Tremor Slam, this actually does work with Diffuse, even if it sounds like physical damage. And for Umbreweave, you can break this by either Tiger's Lusting yourself or someone else, or have Chi running, depending on the order you're using your cooldowns, but groups usually will kill these super fast. So it is important to be grouped for this mechanic so the webs can be cleaved down quickly, but if there's a straggler, you can use Tiger's Lust to break out a friendly target, or Touch of Death. And then there is also a tank buster, but the tank should be ready for it and you shouldn't need to use any cooldowns here, but just be out of the circle because it will one-shot you. Overall, this fight is really important to try to maximize your uptime for your hot maintenance, as there is a combination of rot damage and large hits that you'll want to be healthy for, and you need to maintain your prep for these large hits to top in between, even outside of cooldowns. There's a lot of movement on this fight, so it is important to also be using your Black Ox procs, as well as your Instant Vivifies with your Zen Pulse procs. This is going to do a lot of healing during the in-between cooldown phases, or in the prep for the large either Umbreweave or Timer Slam. When it comes to cooldowns, I usually put my cooldowns at the end couple seconds of the splice so I can top people up outside of just my little spot healing, just to make sure that we are as healthy as we can be going into the big slam. Ideally, you would be able to time your defensives to take care of the last few ticks of the splice into whatever large hit is going to be coming. But if you think that you are going to need the help from your defensive before the large mechanic happens, then you can definitely use it there as well. Any damage reduction here is good as long as you are not giving up something that you're going to die to a one-shot to later. Since there is a little bit of forced downtime between baiting the orbs and the tank buster, typically I will drink my mana tea stacks down while we're moving and there's no healing needed, or during the process of elimination, which is the tank buster. The Twilight Warlocks in Batol throw out a curse, which is a large healing absorb. This was footage from the first week, and these mobs have been nerfed, and now there's only one curse that goes out per cast, and this has made this mechanic significantly easier, but mechanically it's still the same. Of course, bringing dwarves and decurses is optimal, but those are not always available. For any large amount of healing on prio targets, you're going to want to make sure that you have Chi Harmony on them, so use your Renewing Mist on the curse targets. I'll usually start with Chi-Ji, especially if it's a larger pack so you can cleave off of the mobs and use the Gust of Mist proc from Chi-Ji. This is my favorite way of dealing with it since it is the easiest and it's the most healing. If the decurse is on yourself, then you'll want to make sure you have Chi Harmony, and then you can use Expel Harm and that will take off a lot of your self-absorb. When Chi-Ji isn't available, you can send your Chi Harmonies and then a Shaylan's Gift. You can also pre-spread Enveloping Mist if you want. And Vivify with Zen Pulse will also do some decent work on these absorbs, so you'll want to use the full kit to get rid of these curses. Revival will not dispel the curse since that is not something we have, but it will give a decent amount of healing to the cursed players. It's also worth noting that if the curses expire, nothing happens, so if you're feeling comfortable with the mob count, all you need to do is let the curses expire and make sure you're getting stops since the curse doesn't do anything itself, it's more about being able to heal miskicks or other unavoidable damage. Viq'Goth is the final boss of Siege of Boralus, and again this boss has been nerfed since this footage. The slam does not do nearly as much damage as before, and it no longer knocks back, so this allows us to pre-cast for any dot application when before that was not an option. The AoE circle around the debuff target does do real damage now as well, so make sure you don't have people standing on the debuff targets ever. This is a fight where you're going to need to be on top of dispels, and if you fall behind, you are definitely going to feel it. Typically, I will dispel the squishier player or the player with no defensives and then send spot healing on the remaining debuff player. If it goes on the tank, I tend to leave it on them unless they ask for faster dispels. Using Diffuse and Revival to catch up if you fall behind or are out of defensives is also something that Mistweaver can do, and this will help reset your cooldown timer for the next set of debuffs. The strategy now is to kill the Demolisher before the Terror, since Demolishers won't respawn anymore. But without the overlap between the slam and the debuff application, this boss is so much easier, but I did still want to include him in the video. There's a couple of weird spots with the Putrid Waters, where you're going to be running from the previous platform to the next, but there are going to be debuffs going out. So typically I will kind of stand in between them just in case our shooter ends up getting the debuff and needs dispelled. I don't want to be too far away. If you're in a pug and you cannot call who you're dispelling, you can send a ping on the player that you're going to dispel first, just so others know not to be near them, otherwise you will get knocked. And then Mistweaver also has access to Lighter Than Air, and this does allow water walking. If you're curious about this ability, I do have a short on it where I go over basically everything that it can do, and that can be found in my shorts channel for the Ability Spotlight playlist. But if you find yourself struggling to get across the water or struggling for positioning, you can use Lighter Than Air and use the water as your own platform for a couple of seconds before the debuff falls off or before the shark eats you. Just be aware that even if you are water walking, the sharks still may get you if you are standing there for too long. And lastly, we have Surgeon Stitchflesh. This is the third boss of the Necrotic Wake, and this is probably the biggest heal check that we have in the current set of dungeons, but it is also a DPS check. This fight is all about cooldown management when it comes to healing CDs, defensives, and DPS cooldowns, with priority targeting being a big influence as well. From the healing side of things, you're going to want your hots up as often as you can, and make sure that you are not overcommitting cooldowns for any particular part of the fight, because it's going to be pretty even over the course of the entire encounter, except for the very end where you may commit boss instead of killing the A-bomb. And when the boss gets pulled down, you will pop GG and start cleaving to spread hots and heal with Gust of Mist. We sent all of our spears on the first go, and we lusted to try to nuke the boss down while cleaving down the very first A-bomb. This pug had really high damage luckily, but you're likely going to need to kill at least 2 creations, so this fight is a heal check, but ultimately it does come down to the entire group to meet the DPS check and do mechanics properly. This fight works really well with Strength of the Black Ox procs as well for the additional buffer with the shields. With the first creation, we pull the boss back down, and then we are going to be killing him shortly after. It's really important to not have multiple creations up at once, since the damage will increase significantly, and it's realistically not healable for an extended period of time. You can see at the end here we have 2 active, so I send my orb just to make sure that we kill this boss. Typically, this is where all of your items are going to be used. If you do not have the items, it's going to be a bit harder, but they're not as impactful as they used to be, so you may be able to hold on to some of them, or you may even be able to kill him if it's your second attempt or something like that. You can also use the shields here, as they are pretty useful for the damage reduction. Even though I didn't get to use mine, it is something that is useful for this fight if people are stacked in it. And that is all I have in this video. If I missed any, let me know. Otherwise, I hope this video was helpful. And if you guys have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitch or in the comments below. Thanks for watching!